America spends over $1 trillion a year just to service interest on its debt. Not on schools, not on defense, just interest. And that payment is now growing faster than the entire economy. You are watching a debt spiral in motion. This pattern has played out before in empires that thought they were too big to fail. It always ends the same way, with a transfer of sovereignty, not through invasion, through accounting. Right now, America adds $1 trillion to its national debt every 100 days. Every 100 days. The debt sits at 37 trillion. That number hits 55 trillion in 5 years if nothing changes. And nothing is changing. The system is designed to roll forward. Refinance, compound, repeat. This is not a crisis waiting to happen. This is a crisis happening in slow motion. You think this is about government spending or political parties. You are wrong. This is about a mechanism, a mathematical trap set for decades. The trigger has already been pulled. I'm going to show you the 5 stages, the historical precedent, and exactly where America is right now on that map. Once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. When your interest payments grow faster than your economy, you are no longer in control. You are in a refinancing loop. And every loop tightens the noose. In 1875, the Ottoman Empire owed £215 million. Their annual income was 21 million. They owed 10 times their yearly revenue. They defaulted. European creditors created the Ottoman Public Debt Administration, a foreign entity with legal power to collect Ottoman taxes directly. Over 1/3 of all revenue went straight to European banks. The empire kept its flag, but it lost control over its own money. That is the endgame of a debt spiral. You do not lose your country in a war, you lose it in a spreadsheet. Ancient Mesopotamia understood this 3,000 years ago. Farmers took loans for seed. When harvests failed, they borrowed again. Soon they were not farming for themselves, they were farming to service debt. So rulers instituted debt jubilees, periodic cancellations, because unchecked debt does not just hurt individuals. It collapses economies. It turns free people into bonded labor. Rome sided with creditors. When the poor could not pay, they lost land, then freedom. Julius Caesar proposed debt relief. The Senate murdered him. After Caesar, the creditor class stayed in power. Rome bled out over 4 centuries from internal collapse. A system where debt extracted more than labor could produce. Now look at where America is. This brings us to stage 1. Easy money, low interest rates, debt feels free. For 2 decades after 2008, rates hovered near zero. Cheap debt was the medicine for a sick economy. Corporations borrowed, governments borrowed, households borrowed, debt doubled, then tripled. But nobody cared because servicing costs were negligible. When you borrow at 1%, you can roll forever. It feels like a gift. It is a trap, because the debt does not disappear. It compounds, and when rates rise, compounded debt becomes an anchor. Stage 2. The rates turn. In 2022, inflation spiked. The Federal Reserve raised rates from near zero to over 5% in less than 2 years, the fastest increase in 4 decades. The average interest rate on US debt jumped from 1.56% in 2022 to 3.27% by 2024. Apply that to $37 trillion. The interest bill explodes. America paid $300 billion in interest in 2021, over $1 trillion in 2024. That is a 300% increase in 3 years. Stage 3. The refinancing squeeze. America is not just paying interest on new debt, it is refinancing old debt. Every year, trillions in bonds mature. Those bonds were issued at low rates. Now they get reissued at current rates. In 2024, the Treasury rolled over $8 trillion. Old debt issued below 2% now costs over 4%. The same debt costs twice as much to service. This process accelerates. In 2024, the US spent more on interest than on defense. Interest is the 3rd largest budget item. The Congressional Budget Office projects that by 2030, interest payments will be the single largest expense. Not Social Security, not healthcare, interest, money that buys nothing. Stage 4. The feedback loop. To pay the interest, the government borrows more. That increases the debt. which increases future interest, which requires more borrowing. This is a spiral. Economists call it the Minsky moment, the point where debt service requires more borrowing than the economy can support. Lenders get nervous. They demand higher yields. Higher yields mean more expensive debt. Ray Dalio calls it the debt-death spiral. Right now, America borrows 6 to 7% of GDP annually to cover the deficit. But that does not include refinancing old debt at higher rates. Real annual borrowing is closer to 10 trillion. 1/3 of the entire economy financed through debt. And buyers are hesitating. China reduced treasury holdings. Japan is selling. So who buys? The Federal Reserve. The central bank monetizing debt. That is not a market. That is a Ponzi scheme in monetary policy. If this continues, the dollar weakens. Inflation returns. Not 2% inflation. Double-digit inflation that destroys savings. When currency loses trust, capital flees to hard assets. Gold. Real estate. Bitcoin. The government has two choices: default or print. America will print. That is the political path of least resistance. But printing does not solve debt. It transfers the cost from creditors to savers. That is the hidden tax of inflation. Stage 5. The sovereignty trade, when debt service consumes so much of the budget that basic functions fail. Infrastructure crumbles. Defense weakens. And creditors start making demands. Not just for payment, for policy. The Ottoman Public Debt Administration controlled monopolies and tax policy. The Ottomans kept their flag, but did not control their economy. America is not there yet. But when interest payments exceed defense spending, priorities shift. When 40% of tax revenue goes to bondholders, fiscal flexibility disappears. You cannot invest in the future when you are paying for the past. That is not freedom. That is dependency. Where are you on the checklist? Stage 1, done. 2 decades of near zero rates. Stage 2, done. Rates have doubled debt costs. Stage 3, happening now. 8 trillion in refinancing at higher rates annually. Stage 4, beginning. Interest exceeds defense. The spiral is forming. Stage 5, not yet, but the pieces are in place. Debt to GDP is 123%. Foreign creditors are pulling back. The Federal Reserve is the buyer of last resort. Every stage happens faster than the one before. It took 2 decades to build this debt. It will take less than 1 to lose control, because compound interest operates on its own exponential timeline. In 2000, national debt was 6 trillion. By 2024, 37 trillion. 24 years to add 31 trillion. The Congressional Budget Office projects 67 trillion by 2035. Growth is slowing. The World Bank revised projections down to 1.4% for 2025. When growth falls below interest rates, debt compounds faster than the economy. That is unsustainable. Paul Krugman said it this way: if growth is higher than interest rates, debt melts like snow. If interest rates are higher, debt snowballs. America was melting snow. Now it is building a snowman. 3 rules to navigate this. Rule 1, do not hold long duration debt. Keep bonds short. 2 years or less. Long bonds get destroyed when rates rise. And rates will rise because debt supply overwhelms demand. Rule 2, own hard assets, gold, real estate with strong fundamentals. Bitcoin, if you understand risks. These are not denominated in dollars. When the dollar weakens, hard assets hold value. That is insurance against purchasing power loss. Rule 3. Reduce personal leverage. If debt service consumes a large percentage of income, you are vulnerable. The system encourages leverage, but cheap money will not stay cheap. Pay down high interest debt. Build cash buffers. This is not financial advice. This is pattern recognition. The people who understand the map survive the terrain. This is not conspiracy. This is a business model. Governments borrow because voters demand services without paying for them. And creditors lend for interest. Central banks print because default is unacceptable. Every actor follows incentives. Those incentives create a trap. Rome, the Ottomans, Weimar, Argentina, Greece. The pattern is always the same. Borrow, refinance, compound, collapse, or transfer sovereignty to creditors. America prints the reserve currency. It has the largest economy, military dominance, but these are privileges, not permanent. When creditors lose faith, they stop lending. When they stop lending, you print. When you print, currency loses value. When currency loses value, reserve status erodes. Lose that privilege and interest rates on US debt could double. That is what happens to countries that lose credibility. The world still trusts the dollar, but trust erodes. Moody's downgraded US outlook to negative. Fitch cut the rating from LAA to AA+. These are warning shots from agencies that assess sovereign risk. Fixing this requires pain. Cut spending deeply, raise taxes significantly, or accept slow growth while stabilizing debt to GDP. None are popular, none win elections, so the system avoids them until forced. By then, the options are worse. Default, hyperinflation, or foreign control of fiscal policy. History shows this every time. This is the game board. Most people do not know the game is being played. The economy is a system with rules. Those rules have bent so long they are breaking. When they break, positioned people will be fine. Others will lose savings, pensions, purchasing power. The invisible wealth that lets you survive and build. That is what is at stake in the next decade. The Ottoman Empire lasted 6 centuries. Rome lasted 5. They both thought they were eternal. Both followed the same pattern: borrow, refinance, compound, collapse. America follows that pattern now. The difference is speed. What took Rome 5 centuries will take America 5 decades. Modern finance moves faster. When the system breaks, it breaks faster. You are not a spectator. You are inside the machine, and the machine accelerates toward a cliff. The question is not whether the cliff is real. The question is whether you see it coming. If you see it, you can prepare. You can position. You can protect what matters. But if you assume someone else will fix it, you will be crushed by the same mechanism that crushed every empire before you. The debt spiral does not care about hope. It cares about math, and the math is unforgiving. If this opened your eyes to the cage you are living in, subscribe. Because in the next video, we dismantle the rest of the illusion.